Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's first department budget hearing. We will have presentation from the Finance Department and the Office of Management, Budget and Grants. I am Councilman Amilcar Hernandez. I am Chair of the Operations, Management, Budget and Government Accountability Committee. This meeting is broadcasting live on HPA-TV's Xfinity Government Channel 96 and Frontier Government Channel 6032. It will also be streamed via hpa-tv.org, the HPA-TV Facebook page, and HPA-TV Apple TV, Amazon TV, and Roku TV apps. It will also be made available on the HPA-TV YouTube channel. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge everyone present here today. To my right, we have Councilwoman Kelly Bilodeau, Council President Shirley Surgeon, and to my left, Councilman Alex Thomas. And now, we're gonna start with our first presentation. So the honor and the privilege to be the first one up is to the Finance Department with its Director, Leanne Rawls. Leanne, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Yeah, she's going to.
Hit any buttons or anything, right?
I told her already.
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you, Council President, and all members of Council present today for allowing us this opportunity to come and present to you first and foremost the Finance Department budget for FY 2025. And a special shout out to Councilman Hernandez for putting finance first on the docket. Usually they say they save the best for last, but this time we know they saved the best first time. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Leanne Rawls. I am the CFO and the Director of Finance. I was just thinking back to it this morning that this is actually my 7th budget presentation as the Director of Finance. I've been with the city for over 18 years and 7 years in the Finance Director role, and this is my 2nd year with the CFO designation. So I wanted to take an opportunity to announce my senior leadership team today. They are sitting here at the table with me. To my left is Constance Rake. She is the City Controller, and she is the Division Head for Accounting and Control. To my immediate left is Nancy Rake. She is the city's tax collector, the one who calls you when you don't pay taxes. To my immediate right is John Phillip, the city tax assessor, the one who determines how much taxes you should be paying. And then to his right is Michelle Harrison. She's the procurement manager. Missing this evening is Sarah Lowenthal. She is the city's director of safety and risk. When she originally asked for vacation leave, I thought it was okay to approve it for the beginning of April, as we typically present in the beginning of May. So she is having a great time in Costa Rica right now while we're sitting here at the table. I wanted to give a special shout out to my executive assistant, Shawana Bowens. Back there waving, she is the glue to our department. She keeps us all focused and on the straight and narrow, and she makes sure I go where I'm supposed to be. Also, to all of my staff who are sitting here in the chambers, there's a couple of them. And those who could not make it tonight, it's great that I have my senior leadership team here supporting me tonight, but without our staff, none of us would be up here presenting the department budget, because without our team, they work tirelessly, day in and day out. They are super dedicated to this city, and we all work hard to make sure that the city's taxpayer dollars are spent appropriately. I just wanted to also take a moment before I get into the presentation. In my role as the CFO, I not only manage the finance department, but I also have oversight of the Office of Management, Budget and Grants. And it is through their hard work and their sweat and tears that you have this budget book in front of you tonight. They do it all under the great leadership of Julian Freund, also at the table, working the PowerPoint. Between our two departments, we work so hard and so well together to make sure that the city's budget and the city's actual spending is reported appropriately. So I just wanted to take a moment to mention that. Okay, so we can get started. As Julian works to get on the right page, what we're basically looking for is the mission of the finance department. And our mission really doesn't change year over year. It's basically to ensure the fiscal integrity of the city's financials, right? We do that by exercising due diligence and control over the city's assets and resources. So basically, we do that by creating strong policies and procedures. We use things like workflow to make sure that the expenditures are appropriate and reviewed by the appropriate personnel before the city pays anything. So that's our main goal. That never changes. We have to ensure that all spending is in compliance with federal and state mandates. So that's, there is no change year over year to that. That's just something we have to do. But one of our other main missions is to make sure that we provide great customer service to both our internal customers, which are all the departments of the city, to city council, to the administration, and then as well as the external customers, all of the taxpayers of the city that John and Nancy see day in and day out in their offices. So this is our org chart. Finance has 6 divisions: the administration division, procurement, risk, tax collection, tax assessment, and then accounting and control. And then I would just like to note that both procurement and accounting and control have subdivisions underneath the main division, and that would be the purchasing unit, supplier diversity, and contract compliance under procurement. And then for accounting and control, it is pre-audit, also known as accounts payable, payroll, and then accounting. And I will say that we are definitely in a different position this year than we were during last year's presentation, because this year we are very close to getting fully staffed. We are down to 3 vacancies within 3 of the units. The teams are definitely getting more complete, and the work is getting more evenly distributed as we're able to fill those vacancies. Julian, you can fast forward through the next few slides. These slides that Julian will fast forward, you can see in your hard copy presentation. It's just the org chart by each division. Okay, so some of the accomplishments that we've had in fiscal 24 to date is accounting and control was awarded the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting from the GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association, for the completion of the ACFR, also known as the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, and I will say formally known as the CAFR, which a lot of people still refer to it as. And if I can just take a moment, this is the ACFR. This is about 6 to 9 months of work with the external auditors, with the departments, with the treasurer's office, with Julian and his team to properly report on the actual transactions of the cities. This is the report that the rating agencies look to, that the grantors look to when they're looking to grant money to the city. So between this book and the budget book, those are the most important policy books coming out of the city. So you all should have received a copy of this in February. Councilman Thomas, I understand yours is missing, but we will get you a copy. If anyone else needs a copy, please let me know. And I would just like to bring up too today that the city filed the ACFR on time. It is due by December 31st of the reporting year, so our fiscal year ends on June 30th, and by December 31st, we have to file our copy with OPM at the state. a few months ago, I was in a meeting with Mayor Bronin at the time and with Julian, and it was a state meeting. It was the MFAC committee, and I don't know what the initials mean. Municipal Finance Accountability Advisory Council. That's what it was. And basically, that council was going over all of the towns and cities that did not submit their ACFR on time, and it's shockingly way more than you would imagine. So I say all that to say that the accounting and control team really deserves that certificate of excellence in financial reporting, but they also deserve kudos for filing timely every year. Very strong team in accounting, led by Connie and with Asha Stapleton as the accounting supervisor. So hands off to them. So another accomplishment was achieved by this gentleman to my right, Mr. Phillip. He and his team implemented a software called Just Appraised, and it is the first AI-based software in the city, I believe. This is a machine learning application that actually reads deeds when properties are sold, and it allows John's team to actually get it into his software system with less errors. So it's been instrumental in allowing him to stay on top of all the work that his department does, especially when he was short two crucial positions in assessment. And yay, it's AI. It's so fun to say that. Another thing is the assessment team also implemented, and we've been working on this one for a while, is online filing of the personal property declarations that our small businesses need to file every year. So it allows these businesses to log into the city's QDS, it is QDS software, right? QDS software with a unique login ID and password, and they can load in their personal property declaration directly into the city software, which basically means that John and his team do not have to enter that information in. And just for everyone's knowledge, Councilman Gale was one of the first users of the online personal property declaration filings this year, so he told us right away it worked well. It's working. A few more changes. Procurement had some changes this year with their procurement threshold. So we were able to increase the small purchases threshold from $5,000 to $10,000. And while that does not sound like a lot, departments like DPW and DDS and the smaller departments that had to get requisitions for small purchases are extremely happy about this increase. So it's been very instrumental in making operations more efficient. I mentioned earlier that procurement has a subunit called supplier diversity. We've had a new staff take a position in that unit over the past year, Augusta Joseph, and she's made some really great changes. I don't know if you've heard, but we've had radio ads on our supplier diversity program. We had a series, was it 10 or 12 ad series over the last year, just advertising our program, and through those ads, she was able to sign up 23 new contractors into our supplier diversity program. And we will continue, it's a one-woman shop, and she really works. And to get 23 new contractors signed up is amazing, especially based on prior year experience. And she's not done. She tells us she's not done. She's got a lot of ideas. Our risk manager, who isn't here this evening, is working with DPW and the fleet management team on a new software called Samsara. And this is a fleet operations software that just generates excellent maintenance data on our fleet. It tracks GPS, it tracks fuel usage, it tracks fuel that's wasted from idling time. It tells us when the car or the truck, whatever vehicle it's in, needs to be maintained. If there's a check engine light, what is that light on for? So this will be something that our fleet management team can really use to determine, maintenance needs of the city's vehicles and how to better utilize them. Samsara also does have some safety features connected to it, which is why our risk manager is involved. They come with the use of backup cameras that a lot of city vehicles do not have, especially on fire trucks and, the big vehicles that the DPW department uses for street maintenance, those sanitation trucks. So they will all get side cameras and backup cameras so that they will have a full 365 view of what's surrounding them. So if you think about these vehicles getting on 91, it make it easier for them to transfer between lanes, and as they're driving through city streets, making sure that they can avoid anything that they most possibly can.
Excuse me. Can I ask a question? Sure.
Save it for the end, I'm almost there. And then I just wanted to point out through the tax deed sale process from fiscal 23, we did have a tax deed sale on June 26th, I believe, 2023 at Yard Goats Stadium. Nancy and her team were able to successfully collect $2.5 million in delinquent taxes, and that's just through redemptions of delinquent taxpayers that came in and paid up their past due balances. Among that was a top 10 delinquent property that's been on our list for years. And it ended up that that property became current on their taxes, and then it was sold to a more responsible taxpayer. And that ultimately is why we like to do tax deed sales, right? Because we want to be able to get those taxes in on time. Next. So some of our strategic initiatives, and again, these don't change much, similar to the department's mission statement, is to try and invest as much as we can in growing the city's grand list, to try and increase and diversify tax revenues. As you know, half of our grand list is non-taxable, so it leads John and his team to try and come up with creative ways to try and divest the portfolio. We always want to ensure that all reporting is done in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, the rules that guide our lives, those federal and state mandates, federal and state grant requirements. They all have different reporting needs that we need to make sure we're in compliance with. We want to maximize the collection of current and delinquent taxes so that the city has enough resources to maintain its infrastructure and provide programs for the residents that we so desperately need. And then, of course, we want to try and enhance all applicable contract compliance reporting and monitoring. Next. So our general fund budget from FY24 to projected FY25 is increasing about $245,000, so a 5.9% increase. A majority of that increase is due to contractual salary increases due to the union contracts. We have no choice but to pay our team that works so hard for us, right? And we do have one non-personnel increase to our armored car services. So that makes up the increase for the finance budget from FY24 to 25. We do have some salaries that get charged to grants, and you can see through that line that went up 6.4%. Again, that increase is due to contractual union increases for salaries. And then lastly, I just wanted to point out on the MRF, in FY24, the MRF budget of $30,227 was based on a vacant position. It was 50% of a vacant position, and that's the position that processes all pension payroll for the city. So it's about 3,000 to 4,000 pensioners that get paid once a month. The MRF has always supplemented this person's salary. However, the vacant position is actually not the position that does the payroll. It's a higher level position that processes the pension payroll. So that's why the increase. So it's a vacant position from 24, it's a filled position in 25, and it's a higher level than what was in 24. Next. So going into highlights and areas of focus for fiscal 25. This bullet's been on my presentation for 2 years now, and I'm going to leave it here because I think this is, has been our main goal for the past few years, and it will continue to be our main goal until we are where we need to be. But basically, department-wide, we will be focusing on rebuilding and training up the staff. We're working on certifications in all divisions, getting folks trained up to where they need to be. Back in, well, I should say due to the pandemic, we lost a lot of staff due to retirement, and a lot of institutional knowledge walked out the door, and it's hard to recover from that, right? And you can't make that up in a year or two. So my goal is to continue to focus on this for 25. We also, with the new administration, need to update all policies and get them under the new administration's letterhead, make sure that they're updated and relevant to current and best practices right now. We are also on the accounting side focused on the final year of the American Recovery Plan Act grant, the ARPA funds. The city was awarded $112 million of ARPA funds back in 2020, and they all have to be obligated by December 31st of this year. So our goal is to make sure that we've utilized that funding and that everything is spent down appropriately come 12/31/24. Another one of our goals, which has been a long time coming, but actually is underway, Michelle is working with Corporation Counsel to update the procurement ordinance. So we have to look at our procurement guidelines and some of the thresholds. They need to be increased with inflation. Everything seems to cost more than $25,000 right now, and it just puts more burden on operations and slows things down a bit. So we want to make sure that we're increasing them to properly reflect inflation and the increases in cost and services and goods, but make sure that it's still low enough that we are ensuring competitive bidding throughout the city. Another issue in procurement that we're working on is, and again, it's a reflection of the pandemic and the inability to fill positions for a few years, but after 2 years of being vacant, we finally filled the senior field rep position in contract compliance. And this is the position that actually goes to the job sites for the construction projects throughout the city to make sure that they're following the requirements set forth in the contracts that they set forward. So the city's HAP, Hartford Affirmative Action Plan. And then we were also able to fill in procurement the lean position. And this is a position that looks at processes, it looks at departments to look for inefficiencies and to try and just create more efficiencies and, if possible, cost savings throughout the city. Currently, the lean project manager is in my payroll unit, looking at ways that we can make the payroll process more efficient. It is quite burdensome, and it's a lot of work that needs to be done in 2 days in order to get the city employees paid timely. And this is something that Nancy and I started working on under the previous administration. So the tax collector is working on a walk-up, self-service, multilingual payment kiosk. And we're looking to put these payment kiosks throughout the city to help ease property tax collections for those taxpayers who may not drive or may not be able to get to City Hall during business hours. So this should help ease their ability to pay their taxes. These machines will accept cash, they will accept checks, they will accept credit cards, they accept all forms of payment. This is another reason why we had to bump up the armored car service budget, because there will be armored car services needed to pick up any funds at these kiosks. There is a slight fee that comes to having these kiosks, but we think it's worthwhile to pay so that the taxpayers have the ability to pay taxes throughout the city and not just at City Hall or online. Working on trying to increase collections on personal property tax delinquencies. So this would be specifically the personal property category of taxes. So this is our businesses that are taxed on the equipment that they own within their company. This is probably the hardest tax category to collect for. So it requires some creative thinking, and there's like no flexibility in the state statutes on how to collect for these delinquent taxes. Then, as I mentioned earlier, the risk unit is working on the Samsara implementation with DPW. So we're finally getting an implementation plan together, and we should be kicking off on this implementation in the next month or two. Another good thing is that we were able to hire a risk coordinator. So this position reports directly to the Director of Safety and Risk, and this position's focus will be on safety throughout the city. So increasing safety trainings throughout the departments. One of the safety training classes we did last year was defensive driving. So it was defensive driving classes, employees in DPW, employees in fire, employees in police, all over that came to take these classes. So we want to ensure that our employees are as safe as possible and that we can get them whatever training that we can to make sure that happens. Another training that we did last year was working in enclosed spaces. So a lot of our DPW teams have to go into these little huts in the ground, and what happens if someone gets trapped down there. So we want to make sure that our first responders know how to deal with how to rescue someone out of these small spaces. So a lot of our insurance providers provide safety training, and it's having the resources here at the city to administer those trainings. You know, it's not just, hey, Safety National says we can do defensive driving, so let's get them in here. It's, you know, getting sign-up sheets, figuring out who needs to take the classes. Do we have enough employees that want to take these classes, that supervisors are saying have to take these classes, getting them signed up, getting their routes covered so that they can take the time to get to these classes. So there's a lot more internal administration work that needs to be done, and with this new safety and risk coordinator position, we'll be able to get there. This position will also focus on OSHA compliance. So we're not the strongest in OSHA compliance, but we are getting better, and we're hoping to fully cross the line with this position who can focus on it a majority of the time. And then this slide is the composition of the department. So residency-wise, we have 24% of our department are Hartford residents. And then you can see the race and ethnicity allocation among the team. it's pretty diverse. I'm very lucky to have a diverse team to work with. And then gender-wise, it's just there are more women in the finance field than there are men. So we're 72% female strong. Go women. Sorry, guys. And that's it. We're open to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Director Rose, for this great presentation. And this explains why you're first. This is setting the bar, right? Setting the bar high for the upcoming presentations for the rest of the month. So before we start asking questions, let me just real quick just go over the rules of engagement. We're gonna have like 2 rounds. So any council person that has a question, 1 or 2 questions on the first round, and then if you have any more questions or follow-up questions, then we'll do a second round of more questions. And that way we give enough time for everybody to have an opportunity to ask any questions or make any statements. So with that being said, I'm gonna open the floor for any of my council colleagues to that have any questions, any statements that they would like to share. All right, so we're gonna start with Councilman Thomas.
Sure. Thank you so much for your presentation, Ms. Leanne, and I appreciate you guys going first. I think it did set the bar high. My apologies for interrupting you. This is my first budget hearing, and so I did not know some of the rules of engagement, so I apologize for that. My first question, and I have a few.
Okay.
My first question is, you said there were 3 vacancies. I only see 2 on the org chart. Is where?
Sure. So we have 1 vacancy in procurement, and that's under the purchasing
Yep.
unit. Then we have another vacancy in collection, and that is the admin assistant. And then we have the 3rd vacancy in accounting and control.
Oh, I'm sorry. I see it now.
Okay.
Yeah, the vacant isn't bolded on one of them, so
Oh,
I
okay.
missed it. Sorry about that. My other question was about the Samsara program. Is that going to be on all like vehicles owned by the city, or just ones that are directly oversaw by DPW?
Well, it'll be on all city vehicles except for police.
Got it. Okay. And then
And I'm sorry to interrupt. Each vehicle may not get all of the cameras. So, the Ford Taurus that John's shop uses to go out to assess properties doesn't need side cameras or a backup camera, but it will have the gateway that records the GPS and the fuel usage and fuel waste and maintenance data.
That's awesome. And then my last question is about the tax kiosks. Are other municipalities doing things like that, like to where they have kiosks throughout their city or towns to where you're able to pay, taxes?
Yep, I'm going to kick this one to Nancy for you.
Thank you for the question. I'm aware of the town of Manchester, and we've spoken with the town and sort of, we're able to speak about their experience with the kiosk. That's the town in Hartford County that I'm aware of, but there are lots of kiosks in other municipalities across the country.
Got it. Thank you so much, Ms. Nancy. And I believe that is all my questions
All right. Well,
currently.
thank you, Councilman. Any other questions from any of my council colleagues here?
I don't have any questions.
All right, Council President?
Good evening, and thank you for excellent presentation every year.
Thank you.
And congratulations to you and your staff for the accomplishment. It's really welcoming to actually see the new improvements that are being done, especially using technology, especially the A1 or I1. Is it A1, John? Whatever.
AI.
The AI. There you go.
You're so close.
Thank you very much. So it's really a pleasure to see the utilizing of technology, to make your department more efficient. So it's a pleasure to hear that. And it's a pleasure to see all your accomplishments. Congratulations on your awards, and you're gonna have to break me by not saying CAFR anymore, because you can't teach a old person. I'm used to CAFR. I'm now got to get used to a new terminology.
Connie and I still refer to it as CAFR too.
Okay, thank you.
Privately, she said.
So I'm working on that. But I did get your report. Thank you very much, and congratulations to Hartford for getting that done on time, because I do know our next door neighbors did not get their done in time. So congratulations, Hartford.
Thank you.
My questions, I'm going to go to the budget book, if you have it with you. So this way, it's easier for me to, because I put my little stickums all over.
I did not bring it, but that's okay. I know Julian's probably got it.
And I'm sure Julian does. Yep. Mhm. Got to go to my revenue section.
She said revenues. So she's looking for something on revenues. Page 6-11,
No, let's start with 6.3,
6.3.
which, and maybe John can help you. I'm looking under the gross levy section, and there is a decrease from adopted 2024 of $19 million for the motor vehicle mill rate cap adjustment. We went down to 18 million.
That's based on a decline in the assessed value of motor vehicles on the 2023 list. It was a substantial decline. Like, I think it was like around 8%, thereabouts.
So about an 8% decline?
Yes. I think that's just kind of a late adjustment for COVID, because the car market has been, behaving bizarrely for a fair amount of time now.
So is that offset? I know, doesn't the state reimburse us back even though the motor vehicle taxes are lower, and the state reimburse us back for some of it?
Recording stopped.
Recording stopped, okay. I didn't touch anything either.
So and my understanding is we still get reimbursed for the loss in tax revenue for motor vehicles, but we're going to be naturally collecting less, and so that number reflects
To
the
that
fact
number-
that we just have less car taxes to collect.
Okay, so the less car taxes also. Yeah, that's like a significant decrease, right there in our revenue. And if I go over to license and permits 6.5, when I'm looking at, building permits, where was I? I think there was a slight increase. Where was I? Oh, from 24, looking at the forecast for 25, only a couple 100,000, for building permits. Is that because of less building? I thought we had lots of.
So, Council President, Management Budget and Grants develops the revenue budget, so I'm going to let Julian answer your
Oh,
question.
okay,
Right.
all right. Well, we can wait for your presentation, Julian. If you want to go ahead now, that's
It's
fine.
your So, good evening, everybody. So we work in collaboration with the planning department, of course, on projecting out the building permit revenues. And what you'll see, and I don't have the page immediately in front of me, but what you see is, high revenues from the building-related permit fees. So that's building, electrical, mechanical, plumbing. In fiscal year '23, and me just get my bearings here. And so much of that was driven by some, real extraordinary projects, and I have a short list of those from the planning department. One of those is the Children's Hospital. So our building permit fees for last fiscal year, FY23, and also the current fiscal year are spiking quite a bit. There has been, additional permitting activity above and beyond those sort of extraordinary projects. But what we did was we took a look at historically what we've collected from a revenue source that does fluctuate quite a bit, and sort of picked a level that was, what we thought we could safely predict, and added on for some smaller scale projects that we see coming down the pike. But again, the timing isn't entirely certain. So it is it's a somewhat conservative projection of about $425,000 in the aggregate for those building-related permit fees, based on just some known activity coming up. But we did not feel that it would be wise to, project revenues to continue to come in at these very elevated rates, given how, that stream of funds tends to fluctuate quite a bit from year to year. And I can get more detail on that when we meet with, development services. for
Sure, if you just send me that list for the projected, maybe where the buildings are coming in, what
Sure.
programs there were, that'll be a big help.
Absolutely.
And I will wait for my second round.
Thank you. I'd like to acknowledge our council colleagues that just joined you, Assistant Majority Leader TJ Clark and Councilman John Gale. And since they just joined us, let's put them on the spot. Do you guys have any questions, any statements you'd like to make? All right. Councilman Gale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and my apologies for my late arrival this evening. Couple of questions for, well, I guess it's both tax collection would be the first question. It's kind of it's a stupid question. It's silly that I have to ask the question, but everybody asks the question when we get our tax bill and it says to mail it to Boston, Massachusetts. And it's just galling that I know it's because we deal with Bank of America somehow, but it's kind of hard to understand why Bank of America can't have a little sensitivity to the taxpayers here, because it does, every time I put that check in the envelope, it just doesn't feel right. So can we do anything about it? I mean,
Well, you're not obviously the first person, or you're like the 1,000th person to have that comment. When Bank of America first told us that this would be the location, we moved from a different bank. They let us know this is a regional lockbox. There's a ton of banks using that particular lockbox in Massachusetts, and we really didn't have a choice, Councilman. It would be that lockbox or another bank, and that was
well, who makes the decision on banks?
the treasurer does.
The
So I
treasurer.
should save my
yeah.
questions for when the treasurer
Yeah.
gets here. And
Yeah, the treasurer is responsible for banking services, so she'll go out to RFP every few years. The last time, I want to say it was 2020, we changed from Webster Bank to Bank of America. But yes, it is the treasury decision, as she's responsible for banking.
I just sort of think we might have a little leverage there, but we'll find out. Thank you. Second question has to do with our assessment appeals. I assume, I shouldn't assume anything. I know that we use our Corporation Counsel's Office to defend many of these assessment appeals. Are we using any outside counsel at all?
Yes, we contract with Howland and Sage for some of them.
Is that a line item that's in your budget, or is that shown somewhere else?
And that would be somewhere else. I think that's under sundry.
It comes out of legal services.
And do we know what that line item is?
I don't.
My trusty friend Julian does. you want to give him the mic, John?
Sorry, bear with me a second while I find it. I have at my fingertips the aggregate line item for legal services, but I would have to sort of dig out any allocation specifically for the support for assessment appeals. But let me at least get you the aggregate figure first. Legal services, again, this is for all outside legal counsel, 3.8 million. I'm sorry, 3.8 million. That's for all legal services.
3.8 is all legal services. Yeah, I'm
Yes,
asking specifically how much of that is going
Right.
for assessment appeals. If you don't, I mean, if you
I
can
will
get
have to
back to us.
dig that out for you.
You can get it back to us?
Yeah.
Okay. Along the same lines, I know our assessor is an expert at the value of all property within the city of Hartford. But I know that everybody that's filing an assessment appeal brings in their experts as well. Do we also utilize any other outside experts in our assessment appeals?
If they go far enough, we generally have to engage, at the very least, an appraiser.
And do we know what the line item is for our expenses for these appraisers?
It's the same legal services line item. So up until the '25 budget, we had a separate line item for appeals and appraisal fees. It was roughly somewhere between 50 or 75,000, but when the law firms send the bills to the legal department, and they were just being miscoded. So we decided this year to just roll up our budget into the legal services budget, because our budget was sitting in sundry, it wasn't within the finance department.
Okay, well, it'd be helpful, if somebody could just, what we're spending for outside experts, what we're spending for outside counsel, just on the assessment appeals line item. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions to you? Councilman, Assistant Majority Leader Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, good evening, everyone. I was listening in the back, so great presentation as always. Your department is very busy. I wanted to ask regarding contract compliance. I think it's probably this could be in the procurement department. What do we do, or how much is allocated in the budget for more of a community engagement regarding working with minority business owners that want to be certified in the city, just to help them understand the process, and because, you know, trying to apply for things can be very difficult to people who are not familiar with the government. But so what are we doing to really help them cut through the bureaucracy?
Michelle, you want that, or do you want me to do it?
Good evening. Thank you for that question.
Pull it closer.
So I can't say per se that there is actually a budget allocated for outreach for contract compliance or for supplier diversity, because that's really what it would be for. But we do have a staff. We have one staff allocated to the supplier diversity, the outreach. And again, we have done the radio ads for about 12 weeks. I believe that was like between December, maybe November, December. Also, she has been networking with different agencies, as well as just having one-on-ones with, you know, potential vendors or contractors interested in being, you know, MWBEs, just educating them. We've had even bookkeeping events to help them, you know, with their business, just educating them. We have a lot of stuff coming down the pipeline, webinars, even bonding and loans, and just even walking them through the bidding process, because some, you know, maybe they're leaving out information or they don't fully understand the process. So that's heavy in the works right now.
I would also add, Councilman Clark, so for the radio ads, we don't have a lot of extra budget in the finance budget. It's pretty tight. But we work with the Office of Management, Budget, and Grants, and when we do need funding, like we did for the radio ads, we got it approved by the mayor, and Julian found us the money. So, you know, we do have contingency and other line items for advertising or marketing and sundry that we can use. The other thing I'd like to point out is that the Minority Construction Council, MCC, gets CDBG money specifically to sign up contractors into the city's supplier diversity program. So Michelle and her team work really closely with Jennifer at MCC, and they collaborate on a lot of events. Like Michelle said, her staff right now is working with MCC to work on a webinar that will be online for people or new vendors to review whenever they are have the time and ability to see how the process works at the city.
Thank you for that. And I just want to say kudos to Michelle, your department. I've worked with your department with some contractors want to understand the process. So thank you for that assistance you have provided, and Leanne, and your leadership. How much was the advertising time and expense were you looking for? What was that cost? Do you remember?
I don't remember off the top of my head, but
It was less than
minute.
10,000.
Yeah,
It was-
it was a small.
Yeah.
And how much airtime was that advertisement for? Was it a period of a week? Was it
No, it was about, I think
It
it
was
was about 12 weeks or
12
so.
weeks?
And out of that, if I may say, you weren't there, but we received about 24 more contractors that were certified just off of that radio ad alone.
okay? And has there been any thought? I know that the HR department had consulted with a consulting firm to send out, I would say, flyers with a QR code. Has there been any thought about replicating that type of model to business owners that have a Hartford address, for just far as like information regarding your department, how to sign up, those type of things?
Not as of yet, but thanks for the idea.
I will also mention, Councilman Clark, that the supplier diversity team has been working with Janice Castle and community engagement, and whenever there's city-sponsored events, they usually will take out a table so that they can provide more outreach.
I've seen them at
Oh,
some.
and they were at the tax deed sale, Nancy just reminded me, at
Okay,
the Yard
great.
Goats Park.
Great. So, do I hear that there could be some room for an additional body, just to focus on this, or is it more? You know, I was coming for this question, or is it more looking to see if we can allocate money towards a more comprehensive marketing budget?
I would say at this point, I'm looking to my left, but I think it would just, at this point, have to be a budget line item coming from somewhere else. However, if this program continues to grow, yes, we would be looking for that fiscal year 26, maybe as a business case.
Okay. And just one final question, actually two. When is the next tax deed sale?
No date as of now, but Nancy and her team just started working with Department of Development Services on it.
Okay, all right. And if you could get anything out of this budget, what one thing would you request?
If you heard my presentation, Councilman, in the back room, then you know I would love to have more money to invest in training up the staff.
Training?
Mm-hmm.
So professional development?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. So now it's my turn. Easy.
Oh, I thought we were done. Time's up.
Yeah, we got round two. But this is my questions for round one. So, I understand that now you only have 3 vacancies, which speaks to, the progress in hiring during the last, 8 months or 9 months. I know personally how hard it is to hire folks, for the finance department at different divisions. But looking at the actual year to date through December, on every single division within the finance, the expenses are between 31 to 38% of the adopted budget. I assume, what I shouldn't assume, but that's why you're here to correct me, that these first 6 months of the year you still had quite a bit of vacancies, and that explains the expenses through December. Is that correct?
Correct. So we had a lot of new employees sign up or start late fall, early winter. We've had an influx probably over the last few months. We were lucky to get John's 2 assessment tech positions filled relatively quickly. Those are probably the most difficult to recruit for. Outside of accounting right now, which is just a national issue across the board, profit, nonprofit, and government. I will add that we did just get notice from an employee who's leaving in payroll, but we are working to fill that position quickly. I mean, this literally just came down the pike on Friday afternoon. It's not something that we are worried about filling. And historically, when we've had difficulty filling a payroll position, we've used temps to ensure that the payroll process still moves forward.
Thank you. Can you speak a little bit more about your efforts in retention? I know that you just talked about training and that normally that's a huge part of building that morale and culture of the department. But in general, regarding retention, now that you only 3 vacancies or 4 in soon, that you are at that level where now you want to protect the staff, now you really want to keep them, what are the efforts that you are implementing in your department to retain the staff?
So my first inclination whenever we have a vacancy is to promote within. I like to post all open positions for internal promotions within finance department first and foremost. So I want to take care of the team that we have now. And if there is a path to create upward mobility for the team, then I try to use that immediately. So that's my first go-to. Secondly, we've started doing employee appreciation events at least once a year. For some reason, if you put City of Hartford on any type of gadget, blanket, shirt, anything like that, the team loves it. So last year they got blankets that said thank you, thank you, thank you from the City of Hartford. So we try to do employee appreciation events. Division-wise, they do a lot of just potluck lunches. I try to take certain members out for lunch or to acknowledge their accomplishments individually. What are some of the other things that we do? Lately, I've been holding trainings, a lot of internal trainings, especially for new supervisors, because they get thrown into this role internally. There's not supervisor training provided consistently at the city. HR has done probably 2 or so over the last 2 years. So we've been trying to just do at least biannually more training on the supervisors so that they're more comfortable in their role. And then when possible, working with the mayor's office and HR and the unions to increase the salaries of certain positions if the salaries are really low, not bringing people in at base pay. If we can bring them in at a higher salary, just trying to stay competitive with the market.
Thank you, thank you. I'd like to open up the floor for a second round. If there are any council members that would like to ask any follow-up questions or any new questions, I'll start with, to my right, with Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the assessor, over looking at the assessment appeals, 23, 24, you were like 300, 200, and you're projected, for 25, for fiscal year 25. So the appeals have dropped that much over the last several years?
I'm not sure.
I'm looking at page 7-4.
Do we have?
Really? I know, I was gonna ask him.
Oh, hold on, here in
Thank
revenues.
you.
One moment, please.
Yeah. So basically, we have, one of the council person is answering your questions for me to say that, right after reval, we have lots more assessment, and as the years go along, the assessment numbers
Gotcha.
decrease.
I think that so fiscal '23, that very low number per appeal per parcel, that is distorted by the fact that we have a significant number of former apartment buildings that are now assessed as condominiums with a separate assessment for each individual unit within the building. And so that's going to drive the apparent cost per parcel down kind of artificially. It's not really happening.
Gotcha, so it's the condos.
We have more than 3,000 parcels under appeal, but there's only about 350 discrete appeals.
You have 3,000 under appeal?
Yes, but that's distorted by condominiums that are really apartment buildings. They're just condominiums for tax purposes.
Okay.
So we now have, in the last 10 years, we've had like 5,000 condominium units added to the grand list, and only 8 of those were built new. The rest are all just apartment conversions.
All right. Okay, John, so let me make sure I'm understanding. Repeat that again,
So in the last 10 years,
We added-
maybe closer to 12, we have 5,000 new to the grand list condominium units that are, most of these are 60s and 70s apartment buildings that were for years classified as apartments, but when our law changed in 2011, they started declaring themselves condominiums to get basically a tax bill that's half what it otherwise would be.
Oh, thank you, now that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah,
Because-
so the numbers really do jump out at you.
Yeah, it did.
That's
Yeah.
just 1 year of a bunch of condominium appeals. And, the numbers aren't large with those. We have them valued at $35,000 to $50,000 a unit, as opposed to millions of dollars for an apartment building.
Wow. I'm gonna send you my other questions in write-up, because this isn't-
Okay.
because I've got a couple more questions jump to mind, but I'm not gonna belabor the point right here, because one of the things I wanted was to get into, now that I'm only on my second round, was to talk about accounting and control. One of the things over the years we have always talked about is the consolidation of, Board of Education, so this is really interesting to see your accounting and control department actually working with Board of Education, Hartford Public Library, Gulf Force. So so when we talk about, actually making city government more efficient, this is a great example that we certainly could use regarding, bringing in everything, under one umbrella, like we did the MHIS department. So I just wanted I never really paid that much attention before, so I just wanted to congratulate you on knowing that, and I don't know who's in charge of that department. Where's my cheat sheet? Who's in charge of your department?
Connie,
Oh,
Constance.
Connie,
Wig.
congratulations. Awesome. This is great. I apologize. I didn't have my cheat sheet with me. Question, working with so many different city agencies, how is that going? You're working with the Board of Ed, you're working with Hartford Public Library. How are you tying all that together? And the number of employees, which I see you have here, is about 13. How are you making this happen?
I didn't devise this, but we work well with all the Board of Education and the library. We all have certain people that we reach out to if we have questions over there. Maureen Coleman, who was, I don't know what her title is over there.
Director of Finance.
Director of Finance over there. We speak pretty much daily.
I will say, Council President, that this is a structure that we, or I personally, when I first started at the city back in 2006, I was in Connie's role for 11 plus years, and this was a structure that I inherited. Over the years, there's been multiple talks about consolidating services between the city, the board, and the library, but when you look at it in actuality, there are not many towns that combine their board finance department with their city or town finance department because the reporting requirements are so different. There is a report that the Board of Ed has to do every year that's due on September 1st. And it goes through not only their financials, but, pupil data, enrollment at the schools, all kind of information. They have one employee who focuses just on doing that report every year because that's how large it is, and it's very timely to do. They also have other issues that they have to deal with, tuition at other schools, transportation, cafeteria. Then the cafeteria has its own fund, and there's the cafeteria and the lunch lady fund, and then they have special events when the classes do specific fundraising to support their proms or field trips or whatever. That all gets accounted for differently and separate than the Board of Education's general fund or their grant funding. So they have truly specific needs that are different than us. The library, on the other hand, yes, they do get a contribution from the city for their operations, but they have a whole not-for-profit structure. They file under a separate tax ID for this not-for-profit. They go through their own individual audit. They have to file a tax return every year. So there's specific differences that make it just unique enough that they need their own team.
So that's one last follow-up question, Mr. Chair. Then how is your accounting and control department interact then if their reporting structures are so different than ours?
So,
what are they doing here?
Per the city charter, the finance department has to review every invoice before it's paid. So the Board of Ed, while they do have their own centralized accounts payable unit, they go through their own internal process, and then they have to send their invoices over to the city, and the city then has to pre-audit each of their invoices.
Gotcha.
So every week we do invoice review for them. The city maintains control of the financial software, Munis. So whenever they're doing adjustments within Munis, they have to be reviewed by Connie and I, sometimes Asha as well as the accounting supervisor. So they interact that way. There's a monthly contribution that gets sent over to the Board of Ed, which is their budgeted allocation. We divide it by 12 every year. One of the accountants is responsible for doing these monthly journal entries that give the Board of Ed and the library and MHIS their allocated dollars for the month. Also, accounting and control is responsible for processing all payroll garnishments, all payroll deductions for Board of Ed employees. We do all of the payroll reporting citywide, so library, board, city, pensioners, we do all of that reporting in the 5-man team and accounting and control. So we interact pretty regularly with both teams and the parking authority as well.
Great. Thank you very much for that answer.
Thank you. Anyone else have any follow-up questions? No? Councilman Gale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to pick up on that earlier conversation on the apartment assessments, and just to review, from my understanding, the City of Hartford is the only municipality in the state, as far as I know, that has two separate assessment ratios. I believe every single piece of property in the state of Connecticut outside of the City of Hartford is assessed at 70% of its market value.
That's right.
But within the City of Hartford, 1 to 3 family houses are not assessed at 70%. 1 to 3 family houses are currently assessed at 37.5% of their market value. Is that correct?
36.75%.
36.75. And as a result of that, some smart apartment owners figured out 10 years ago that if they took a 12-unit building, which was being assessed at 70% of market value, and they made it 12 condominium units, they were able to effectively cut their taxes almost in half. Is that what happened?
That is indeed what happened.
And I know that the City of Hartford then, understanding that this phenomenon was taking place, went to the legislature and attempted to put a stop to this, I'll call it the condo conversion epidemic.
Right.
And I believe that we did get a change in state law. I'm wondering, has it effectively stopped further condominium conversions?
It hasn't stopped it entirely, but where we used to get 15 or 20 conversions a year, now we're getting 1 or 2 or 3. Basically, there's a they can still achieve the tax savings by declaring themselves a condominium if they spend 35% of their purchase price within 3 years of purchase in improving the property. So, you know, there's a lot of value-add projects out there that investors buy and fix up, and we get 1 or 2 a year converting to condominiums and achieving the tax savings. A lot of them will, you know, they're planning to do that, so they'll declare themselves condominiums, but perhaps they have not hit the spending threshold by October 1. We'll still have to split them up into individual units on the grand list, but we assess those at 70% of value until they do achieve that spending threshold.
And that's your department then that is
Yes.
that is doing that compliance to confirm the 70, that they've spent the percentage.
35% of the sale price.
35%.
Yep.
Second part of this question is, on that assessment ratio, that's the only thing that's different in the entire state of Connecticut, there's a formula by which that assessment ratio is supposed to increase. And I know at one point it was 35%, and you've told us tonight that it's now 36.75%. Is it scheduled to increase over the next year?
No. So that is an annual calculation that I have to perform comparing the CPI year-over-year January reading to the grand levy, the amount of taxes raised year-over-year. Depending on how those numbers relate, the ratio can either stay the same, go up 1.5, 2.5, 3.5, or 5%. And the law's been in place since the 2011 grand list. At that time, I think it was 26.2% then in that first year, and it's stayed the same for maybe 4 or 5 years. It has gone up 5% a couple of times. This year it won't go up. You'd have to spend. I did do the math when I first got the CPI reading, and you would have had to spend tens of millions more in taxes in the upcoming year over this present year in order to push that ratio up even 1.5%.
Got it. But the goal of that law is that ultimately the city of Hartford's 1 to 3 families should get to 70% like everybody else.
Yeah, it'll be a long time under the existing law, but yeah, that was thinking at the time, I think.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I only have one question, and it will be, first, I'm happy to hear that that the contract compliance, you were able to hire somebody for that senior, senior field rep. I assume that's the person that will be looking at construction sites to make sure that they are in compliance with the minority and women business-owned enterprise, right? So, briefly, what happens when that person determines that they are not in compliance? Who issues the fines or who issues any kind of penalty? Does that sit within that same department, or does it go to the Equity Opportunity Department? Where does it go?
So I'll let Michelle take this one, but basically the procurement ordinance determines how that needs to be treated. But go ahead, Michelle.
The senior field rep is under the contract compliance unit within procurement. So it's not just the senior field rep that is monitoring the projects. They are the, I would say, the face, to where they're checking out or they're interviewing different staff or workers to make sure that if they're saying they're plumbers, that they're not doing the work of electricians or whatever it may be, or even just doing on-site interviews, making sure that they're getting the proper rate, whether it's prevailing rate, Davis-Bacon rate, or living wage rate, just asking them without, saying, hey, are you getting this specific rate? Basically giving them the option to just, give that information. Sometimes there are audits that the senior field rep as well as the project manager does on the projects. Now, again, it's not just that will get us to enforce penalties. We try to work with the contractors to get them up to par as far as their contract and making sure that they're meeting the MWBE requirements, they're meeting the Hartford residency requirements. Try to make sure that we're holding meetings. We've done retrainings with contractors to make sure they know how important this program is. Once all of that is exhausted, now we start having conversations with the corporation council. And
those penalties, if everything else fails, those penalties include, it could be financial penalty, but it could also be, any future procurement process, you will not be able to apply, or some sort of
all of the above.
All of the above.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we try not to penalize the project itself, right? Because it doesn't do anybody justice. It hurts the city, it hurts the employees if we stop the contract. So what we try to do is find other ways to work with the contractors or the construction managers to try and remediate the issue. So sometimes Corporation Council will advise us, well, they're the contractor on this specific project, but they've been selected for this upcoming project, and since they didn't meet the minority percentages on this project, we're going to ask them to double it up on the next project. So sometimes you have to look at all of the contractors' projects in totality to ensure compliance. Other things we've done is we've stopped payment to the contractor until they become compliance, but we don't shut down the project. So that really is the last resort. And, obviously it's harmful to not just the city, but to the employees and the project itself.
Thank you, thank you. One last question, Council President.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Leanne, I'm looking at 4.1. I'm looking at the general property tax, and there is roughly a 9% decrease in tax abatement. wondering where that is coming from to reflect expiring abatements. Do we know what that is all about? How does that going to affect? I mean, it is affecting our revenue by about 9%.
Did you say
4.1.
So, I do sit on the tax abatement committee, so
That's
I
why
can
I'm
speak to
asking.
this one a little bit. As you are aware, there are housing abatements that are given out to new developments or repairs to existing developments, low-income housing abatements. So those generally have a contract term of anywhere from 10 to 15 years. So it's all based on what projects are coming in front of the abatement committee and then the expiration of existing abatements.
Okay, so this is basically what we're anticipating for this coming fiscal year.
Yeah,
That
so
would-
we keep a running spreadsheet of all existing abatements, and then we determine their outlay for the length of their abatement. So then we track that year over year. So we add to it when new abatements are approved by council, and then as the older abatements fall out, we keep the running total.
So can I say then that as the abatement is expiring, then they go into full tax payment?
So we instituted in the tax abatement committee, a few years ago, that if you have an existing abatement and it expires, you have to go through a full year of full boatload taxes before you can apply for another abatement.
So this may be kind of, I would say, maybe kind of even out a little bit, you know?
Yeah. Do you know which abatements are expiring for the decrease? Yeah. We can provide you the spreadsheet, Council President, but off the top of my head, I can't speak to which ones are falling off.
We understand, you know, and stay in the same page, you're also looking at a decrease of about 2%, you know, in your grand list for, 1.5%, you know, annual growth in the next 26, 29. Is that because of maybe coming up for reval again?
So that's what John spoke to earlier. The
Yeah.
grand list itself dropped 1.5%, and at the same time, the state changed the way that we treat penalties
Yeah.
for those companies that don't file their income and expense. Am I getting this right? Yes. Yay, go me, report. So between the combination of the two, what you see here, when John does finalize the grand list, we don't just take those numbers and those become the final budget. So we work with Julian, we work with Nancy. The charter dictates how we have to determine the current year levy budget, but we also then have to look through prior year levy collections. We have to determine what's an appropriate interest line item budget. But at the same time, there's tax appeals that are going on. There's elderly tax credits that we need to take into consideration. So there's a whole reconciliation that starts with the grand list that ultimately gets us to our ending tax revenue budget.
And I'm going to say this is my last question, Mr. Chair, and that is the decline in the downtown north revenue. The next page over 4.2. Is about a 13% decrease. Where, you know, is that the baseball stadium or is that, it says downtown north revenue.
Yeah. So if you recall, there's a parking lot right across the street from the stadium.
Yeah.
That lot has been closed down, so the reduction of the dono revenues is just due to parking revenues.
Oh, that's the downtown north where they're going to be doing the new building?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Okay, that explains the decrease. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. And that will conclude our questions. Thank you very much for the whole entire leadership of the department for showing up. It's just right 7 o'clock, so now you could go enjoy a nice dinner. And we will be returning in about 10 minutes, so right 10 after 7, we're going to be doing the presentation with the Office of Management and Budget. So please stay tuned.
Thank you.
All right, we're back on live for those thousands of people watching us through HPA-TV and those in attendance. So now we have the opportunity to hear from the next department, the Office of Management and Budget, with its leader, Julian Freund. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good evening again. Council President Surgeon, Chairman Hernandez, and members of the council. I'm appreciative of the opportunity to present to you our budget for FY25 for the Office of Management, Budget, and Grants. Seated with me at the table are some of the leadership within the department. To my left is Jeff Halen, Assistant Budget Director. To my immediate right is Cheryl Horowitz, who is the Director of Central Grants Administration. And to her right is David Beck, our other Assistant Budget Director. You can go to our presentation, please. And you can go to our first slide. If you just click the mouse, it'll proceed right through. There you go. Thank you. The first slide is our mission statement, and our mission is emphasizes the support that we provide to the decision makers in the area of budget, providing projections and forecasting, developing the budget itself, the importance of the budget as a fiscal control document, and also the support and guidance provided by the Grants Office. I will be looking to update this mission statement to reflect some of the other elements of the department, which includes non-tax revenue collection, and also the central duplicating graphics and mail unit as well in the future. You can go to the next slide. Currently, the department is comprised of 4 divisions or units. We have the Budget Development Unit, which prepares the annual budget, prepares the recommended and adopted budgets, monitors revenues and expenditures throughout the fiscal year, prepares all of the monthly financial reporting, including the reporting to the MARB, and prepares the 5-year forecast. Our Central Grants Administration Unit has sort of 2 primary areas of focus. One is the coordination and management of 3 HUD-funded programs. That's the CDBG program, ESG, and the HOPLA program. And those are formula grants that involve a process for soliciting proposals for funding from community entities and city departments, evaluating the proposals, compiling them into a proposed plan for use of the funds, shepherding that plan through your review and your approval, and then ultimately coordinating the implementation. The other major focus for central grants is in providing support to the administration and the departments in prospecting for grants, identifying grants for application that would support cities' priorities, and assisting in implementing the grants, reporting and compliance requirements, and really helping in all phases of grant management. Our Revenue Management Division is staffed by one person who is responsible for invoicing and collection of a wide range of non-tax revenues. So that includes revenues we collect from police private duty, special events, the cannabis tax, and she processes payments and pursues collections on delinquent accounts. And then our graphics and mail operation, that's our print shop. They provide print and duplication to all city departments, and they provide mail services to all city departments. They handle some very large print jobs, such as the budget document, and some very large mailing efforts, which would include something like the registrar's voter's canvas. You can go to our next slide, please. So for fiscal '24 highlights, we had our designation with the State Oversight Board modified from a Tier 3 to Tier 2 oversight. This reflects a somewhat less intensive level of oversight. It's directly attributable to the state's improving financial condition. And the statute sets forth those sort of benchmarks that the city would have to achieve in order to get this modification. And they really revolve around, maintaining positive operating results for consecutive years. So we know we've achieved surpluses for several years now. And the fund balance reaching a threshold of at least 5%. And then the last piece is the city's bond rating, which last summer, with the rating by Moody's, has reached an investment grade bond rating level for both Moody's and Standard & Poor's. So now currently at the Tier 2 level of oversight, we get a little bit of relief on some of the requirements that the city has to meet. For example, we no longer need to take labor contracts before the MARB for approval. We do, however, are required to continue providing monthly financial reporting. We will continue to take our annual operating budget to the MARB for their approval of certain revenue assumptions, and we will continue to be required to update our 5-year financial forecast. In addition to that, our ability to borrow will still be constrained, and that has as much to do with our current contract for financial assistance as anything else. That's the contract by which the state agreed to assume the city's general obligation debt, and those requirements will remain in place for the life of that debt. Can you go to the next slide, please? Another highlight for '24 is we have kicked off our search for some grants management software. We're working on a number of ways to really develop our grant division's capacity to manage grants, given the large volume of grants, both in the number of grants and the dollar amount. And they're very diverse funding sources. They all have their own reporting requirements, their own grant schedule, spending restrictions, and so forth. And so we've been looking for a cloud-based grants management solution that would serve as a platform to support us in managing all of the phases of the grant cycle, from prospecting through implementation and closeout. And it would serve as a platform for grants that are both awarded to the city, as well as grants that the city awards to community agencies as subrecipients. So we've issued the RFP, we've evaluated the proposals, we're in the process of selecting a vendor, and we expect that implementation project to begin by July 1. You can go to the next slide, please. A couple of other highlights from the year. We are fully staffed. We filled a couple of vacancies that occurred mid-year in the administrative division and in central duplication. And then we also filled 2 positions that had been vacant for somewhat prolonged periods in both the grants office and the budget office. Another highlight is that about this time last year, we mentioned that we would be submitting an application for GFOA's Distinguished Budget Presentation Award, and that's an award program that looks about 80 different criteria and evaluates a budget's effectiveness as a financial document, a communications document, a policy document, and an operations guide. And thanks to the hard work of these folks and the rest of the budget team, the city was awarded that budget award. And it's just a testament to the quality document that the team puts out year after year. And I also want to mention that we are continuously seeking grant opportunities that align with the city's strategic priorities. So far this year, we've received or been awarded 17 new grants and for a total of $15.35 million. And then I've listed some other items here that are not necessarily specific to FY24, but work that goes on continuously in the department. Can you move to the next slide, please? So our strategic initiatives, providing accurate budget reporting and rigorous analysis, tracking progress on our fiscal sustainability plan, which is the plan that we submit to the Oversight Board. One new item that we added for this year is to strengthen our oversight of HUD and other federal grant programs to ensure compliance and sustainability. Again, this is one that's a carryover from prior years, is to continue to pursue grant opportunities that support the administration's priorities and to continue our focus on delinquent revenues, particularly for private duty, but also special events and city rentals. You're already there. Budgetarily, this slide shows that our operating budget is up by 6% in FY25 over the current year budget, and that is the cumulative effect of two things. One is an overall increase of 2% for payroll, and the other is inclusion of $70,000 for the grants management software that I mentioned earlier. The moderation in the projected grants expenditures is driven by really two things. One is the spend down of COVID-related funds that were provided through the CDBG and ESG programs that are non-recurring, and so we see those funds being spent down. We will not receive additional funds through any COVID-related grant program. And then we've also taken a little bit of a different approach on projecting our expenditures on the grants, that often we don't spend down everything in one fiscal year, and so we've attempted to smooth our projected expenditures out over time. This is a work in progress with our projecting grant expenditures, and it's something that we hope to really fine-tune and improve with the software system, and that it would be a platform that would be able to provide more routine updates to the board on the status of grants and grant expenditures. Some of the areas of focus for us at the top of the slide is really, a number of ongoing efforts, assisting leadership in aligning our budget and our grant efforts with strategic priorities, as I've mentioned a couple of times already, ensuring equity in our budgetary decisions, communicating budgetary information clearly and timely, continuing to ensure compliance with all of our requirements before the MARB, and continuing to place an emphasis on our non-tax revenues, collections, and continuing to try to generate additional surplus to build up our fund balance. For FY25 specifically, again, I've mentioned the grants management software. That will be a major effort in implementing that project over the course of the next fiscal year. We are also, in parallel with that, we'll be looking at our policies and procedures for grants and areas where we can achieve some efficiencies and enhance our consistency in managing grants. We're also looking at some opportunities where technology might be able to help us out in the budget development and reporting areas through a lot of innovation and creativity by the team at the table and the rest of the team over the last several years. They've been very resourceful in carrying out all of the responsibilities of the department, including reporting to the State Oversight Board. We have a number of internally developed tools and models that have been developed. And a lot of this reporting is a very heavy lift. And so if there are opportunities out there where technology can help us out, we want to find those. Somewhat similarly in the print shop, we have a team that works very hard to accommodate every request they get. We currently lack a system that would be a sort of work order system that would allow them to work as efficiently as possible as well. So we'll be looking at whether or not there are some work order systems that we could use for our print shop and help that team out. And then lastly, we have our demographic breakdown. You can see here about 20% of our team are Hartford residents. You can see the breakdown of race and ethnicity and gender there. I guess I would just say on the gender piece that the finance department kind of helps us balance out if you look at us combined. That concludes the presentation, and we are happy to answer your questions as best we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. And now on the first round, for 1 or 2 questions, I'd like to open the floor for my council colleagues. I'll start looking. Any questions on this side? Councilwoman Bilodeau? You okay? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Just one question. What is the biggest improvement that you feel will happen with the grants management software?
I think having one source of information for all of our grants information will be, it's the first biggest improvement that pops into my head. It'll make reporting a lot easier. We'll be able to, again, there will be one source of truth for everything. But I want to give Cheryl a chance to see, she may have a different thought on what the biggest improvement will be.
Well, I think it's along the same lines of what Julian said, but right now, our tracking system is the Munis system, which is a financial system. And so it caters more to the needs of financial system, especially general fund, which might be based on a yearly basis. Grants don't always go on a yearly basis, and many times they overlap multiple years, and there's a variety of ways that they can be accounted for across those years that make it very, very difficult to do an accounting on a grant itself. And so this is going to help us to be able to follow grants as they are projected over the course of their life. And it can be 1 year, it can be multiple years.
Thank you.
Assistant Majority Leader T.J. Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Julian, good presentation. I have a question regarding our fund balance, and I recognize the fact that we are now, which is a good thing, in Tier 2. First question is, do you foresee us continuing to be in Tier 2 while we still have the contract assistance?
That's a good question. I don't know. I know, the contract assistance will remain in place until the bonds that were covered are retired, which takes us out to 2036. The reporting requirements are very similar. That the oversight structure is so similar between Tier 2 and the contract for assistance that I guess I haven't really gamed out how far out we would be kept at Tier 2. So it's a good question. I don't have a great answer for it.
Okay. No, that's fair. Going back to the fund balance, over the last maybe 3 or 4 years, we've experienced a surplus, and with the revenue projections is not as high as before. What strategies has your team worked with the administration or discussed regarding how we can hopefully materialize some monies through the revenue collections, everything else to set aside, since things look like they're not as high as they have been?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the core strategy for doing that is just, it's good budgeting, which is budgeting revenues conservatively, not including one-time revenues in your budgeted revenues, and That's essentially it, but, and then, you know, we budget conservatively on the expenditure side in terms of, you know, we do make some assumption for turnover and vacancy savings, but we're still pretty conservative on that front. And so, you know, when we do get, for example, a one-time revenue that was unanticipated, or a state grant comes in higher than anticipated, you know, we can kind of lock that in as, you know, potential surplus for the year. When we do have vacancies, you know, we have those savings to accrue as well. So it's really just a budgeting practice of being conservative.
Okay, and my final question, in this recommended budget, are there any one-time revenues?
No.
No? Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Council President?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In your presentation, you said you had about 17 new grants?
Yes.
I think it was 17. I believe it was 17.
Yes, it was about 17 new grants, and it was, I believe, roughly $15.3 million.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, 50, right. Could you send us a list of where these new grants, or are they part of the grants area in the budget book?
They should be reflected in the grants area, depending on the timing. That it may not match one-to-one, but we could absolutely get you a list of the grants that are included in that 17.
Okay. Basically, your grants department actually focused on the CDBG, you know, UPWA and ESG. What about other departments, fire, police, public works? Do you go out to these departments and see if you can assist in getting them different grants to cover their needs, what they're looking for?
Yes, and sometimes we don't have to go out to them. Sometimes they come knock on Cheryl's door. So the answer is yes, depending on the department and depending on the type of grant, the kind of support that Cheryl's office provides will vary case by case, but I'll let her speak to it in more detail.
Thank you.
So some of this is just historic. So as we mentioned before, I've been in this role for maybe a little over 2 years. Others have been there for much longer. When I came into this role, there were already established grants that we gave, or awards, to a variety of departments, and that's what Julian was talking about, where a department has an expectation that they can receive funds from us for various kinds of very critical functions, like our fire department using disposable equipment, and they rely on us every year for that kind of assistance. So things are changing now with that, because we have been doing, as Julian mentioned, a very close reading of what compliance actually is, what is HUD compliant and not. And what we have discovered is that sometimes the definitions have not been adhered to that closely. So what we are doing this year, and we've started doing it last year, is really just having conversations with each of the departments. Julian has already outreached to them to kind of say there is monies available from CDBG. All of that money can only be allocated under guidelines that have been already established in what's called a consolidated plan that's done once every 5 years. So once every 5 years, our department goes out to the community, finds out what the high needs are, and then records them to say, these are what we're going to focus on for the next 5 years. Once they appear in that, and we know what those priorities are, then each department can view through that lens their own needs and make suggestions to us as to what kinds of things might be appropriate for them to get CDBG funds for. And then we try to accommodate them and help them to be able to use that money in an effective and compliant way so that there's absolutely no danger of that money's being recalled.
That makes sense. Julian, let's talk about the intergovernmental, the projected, maybe that was Leanne, the projected revenues that are coming in for our pilot program. And you didn't increase it very much, kind of, it stayed flat, it looks like.
The, I'm sorry, intergovernmental revenues? Yeah, those are driven, the largest component of that is the various sources of
Right.
state aid. And so we use the governor's proposed budget to build the budget because those are really the best numbers we have at the time until such time that the General Assembly has adopted a budget. The governor's proposed budget is really the best.
So it's just an
thing to go
estimate,
with,
you're not
yes.
really, so that's why it just kept flat from last year to sort of this year. I think it was maybe
Yes, I
a
think there
million.
were, there was, I'm trying to remember if it was the revenue share or the pilot. One of those two did go up
I think of one,
considerably.
I can't remember, I think, I'm not sure it was a pilot or one of those did not,
But most of the, so there's probably half a dozen different streams or grants that make up the major state grants, and for the most part, they were flat. There was one that increased, and I want to say it was roughly 3.4 million.
I can't,
Somewhere in that neighborhood.
I think I lost my page. I think it's on page 6.6-7.
Yes, it is the pilot. So the very first row on that table, it's actually a bold row that says payment in lieu of taxes pilot. You'll see that FY25 is just about 60.4 million, and our budgeted amount for the current year was just slightly under 57 million.
Yeah,
So that's the increase. We actually received, in the current year, we received the 60.4 million, but our original budget was based on the lower figure, again, this time last year, the governor's
Right.
budget. So again, getting back to the point that Councilman Clark raised about, generating surpluses, that was, a windfall in the current year that will, help us in, building up surplus.
so basically what will make it a little extra this year, we don't know yet.
Correct.
And then where would that would put that into surplus, where would you put those additional funds? If you anticipate, say, 15 million, you get 18 million.
Right, so those all factor into our surplus projections, which are, part of our monthly report. We update monthly what we're projecting for both revenues and expenditures, of course, and, we arrive at a projected surplus for the year, which is updated monthly. And so then that becomes, the basis by which we'll, the policy has been for the last several years, at least the last several years, that the first 5 million will go to unassigned fund balance, and then the balance may be allocated for specific uses. So, for example, in the FY25 budget, when we get to the recommended capital improvement plan, you'll see that after that 5 million, we're recommending that 6 million be allocated to supplement our CIP for next year. So that would be 6 million above and beyond what we've programmed in here as the contribution from the FY25 budget. We're also recommending that 2.5 million be allocated towards the VET program, which is the Vehicles, Equipment, and Technology program, where we purchase things like fire apparatus or heavy equipment for public works, police cruisers, and major technology projects.
Yeah, I did see that increase that you have put, you know, on the line item. You put that, never really paid, I think you put it under, is it 3041 for the line? I think you put it, how's it? I can't find it. I did 40 or 41, the page it is, where I did see a line, yep, vehicle. You did put an extra monies in there that's really separately from the CIP fund, so,
Right,
okay.
correct.
And that's just to purchase maybe, you know, some vehicle from Public Works or whatever those needs are. But it's not shown in the budget book under CIP. So how would we know what vehicles you maybe propose to buy for what department?
But we could give you an outline of what the proposed purchases are.
That would be helpful,
Yeah.
so we can see where that is in. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, sir.
All right, Councilman Gale?
Thank you all for that presentation. Picking up on the question that was raised about fund balance, it's always a mystery to me as to, you know, where I find the fund balance and what it is. And it's also, is this also we sometimes call the fund balance the rainy day fund?
Yes, it's sometimes used interchangeably, yes.
So we have a page in our book, page 514, that gives us all sorts of fund balances from all these different funds that the city maintains. Where in there would I find what you've been referring to as the fund balance?
You would find towards the bottom of the page, so this is right out of the ACFR, which Leanne spoke to earlier. So this is an exhibit in the ACFR that shows the activity for the year, the revenues, the expenditures, and there's a section that shows other financing sources and uses. That would be, you know, things like transfers out or transfers in. And then there's a line that says net change in fund balance. Okay? And the column that we're focusing on, by the way, is the one on, under general. So that's our general fund. I should have mentioned that to begin with. Do you see that on the left?
General.
Yes, so that's our general fund. So you see our activity, revenues, expenses, other sources, other financing sources and uses. We get a net change in the fund balance. It shows us what we started the year at, which is the $38,725,000. And then the resulting fund balance, which is essentially the change of $20.6 million added to the starting point of $38.7 million. That fund balance shown there at the bottom of that page is our total fund balance. That's the aggregate fund balance of our unassigned, our assigned, our committed, and restricted. So there's four pieces. We didn't pull the page from the ACFR that shows that breakdown, but there's on the balance sheet that is the sort of the companion exhibit to this in the ACFR. It shows what the four pieces of that $59,383,000 is. I just have it here so I have the unassigned piece. The unassigned piece, which is basically the most flexible, it's available for any use. So out of that $59,383,000, as of June 30th, $36.4 million of that was the unassigned.
Is that what we would call the rainy day fund, that 36 million?
Do we have a protocol here for what? I don't use the term rainy day fund for exactly this reason, is that it could mean anything to any different people.
I see our finance director kind of shaking her head yes.
I'm back. Yes, so that is commonly referred to as the rainy day fund. But I do want to just clarify one thing that Julian stated. So the page that Julian took from the ACFR, when we report on the general fund, per the generally accepted accounting principles, we have to roll up the fund balance of the operational fund or the general fund of the Board of Education, the city, and the Hartford Public Library. And typically, the Board of Ed always spends down their line item, right? So we give them 280 plus million every year. And then when you look at the ACFR or the spending in Julian's budget reports, it shows the $280 million. So that essentially includes the Board of Education. But if you drill down on the Hartford Public Library, they typically will end the year plus or minus fund balance. Sometimes they end the year at zero, sometimes they have a couple $100,000 of fund balance. This balance that Julian is using does have a slight amount from the Hartford Public Library included.
Okay. And then the relationship then of this fund balance, rainy day fund, to the MARB, I'm assuming that the MARB would like to see us with a fund balance that's at a certain level, whether, I don't know if it's a percentage of something or a fixed dollar or something. I'm just wondering, where are we with respect to where the MARB would like to see our fund balance? If we know.
We don't have a set target with the MARB. You know, the MARB, when a municipality first appears before the MARB, it's a small sample at this point, but you know, the situation is that it's a financially distressed municipality. So from the MARB's perspectives, their mission is to assist and help the municipality get to a position of financial stability. You know, we've sort of gotten to that point, you know, at around 6%. I don't know that, you know, we obviously would like it to be higher as well. The city's policy is a minimum of 7.5%. So I think, you know, the next step would be to get to that tier, but the MARB, to a certain extent, you know, I think is satisfied that we've followed our plan to increase the fund balance in that percentage each year, and is probably less concerned with, you know, hitting 10% by 2028 or any other set target. We just haven't had those kinds of conversations with them.
And
I would also add, Councilman, that the former administration came up with the current plan that we're using to grow the fund balance by isolating that first $5 million of surplus every year, automatically goes to unassigned. And then from there, the difference is used, as Julian mentioned, to supplement the capital improvement plan, because we are on a pay-as-you-go funding source for capital improvement. So the more money we can throw towards CIP every year, the more projects we can get done. And then from there, the difference is supposed to go towards our OPEB liability, which we all know is not going to be funded in any of our lifetimes. So when we initially went under the MARB in 2018, I believe our fund balance was 0.23%, and here we are today, a little over 6%.
And when you say 6%, that's 6% of what?
6% of general fund appropriations, the budgeted appropriations.
Got it. Thank you. Appreciate that. At the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned that you had submitted the budget for and received an award, and that came from something called the GFOA, which I don't know what it is.
This is the Government Finance Officers Association, and it's the same association that the city applies for the recognition for the ACFR as well. That's, you know, sort of a sister
So this is a
program.
national association?
Yes.
And we received that award out of, how many other people did we share the award with? Do we know?
I don't know if that's, I think there's about 20 Connecticut municipalities that participate in the budget program, and I don't know about the,
Yeah, nationwide, there's about 1,700 recipients of the budget award, and that's 1,700 of state and local municipalities. So as you are
And
well
in
aware.
Connecticut, how many received it in Connecticut?
I'm not sure because it's hard to get those numbers. But as I mentioned earlier in our presentation, you know, not a lot of, what was it, 40% or 60% of the towns did not even file their act for timely?
oh, only a third. So
Yeah, only a third of the towns actually filed timely for their act for. So part of getting the award is filing timely. And Julian didn't get to this part yet, so I'll just jump in. There's a list of criteria, pages long, that you have to meet in order to get the award. And then there's an independent panel of judges that each rate your budget book and your ACFR against this set criteria. And then you get, if you are a recipient of the award, you get those, their judge scorecards, essentially. And I happened to look through Julian's today, and he got a lot of proficient and a lot of outstanding criteria levels met. So
This is a really big deal.
it really is.
And Julian is just like the most understated guy here in
He so
city
is.
government. So, you know, congratulations.
Yes.
Really, really big deal. Thank you.
it's really these guys, and honestly, if they had applied last year or the year before or the year before that, they would have received the award. I mean, we just happened to apply this year, and, you know, the budget that they built years ago just checked all the boxes, so.
Again, understating all the way, but certainly understood. Thank you.
All right. Councilman Thomas?
Yeah, thank you so much, Julian, for your presentation. I believe I just have one question. I believe it's a simple question. The grant management software, do you have any software in mind that you guys are looking at, or is there lots of different ones?
We're in the process of selecting a vendor. We put it out to RFP, and we'll be making a selection shortly.
Got it. And then my next question, which I feel like is part of it, is that $70,000 added to the budget, is that a one-time cost, or is that going to be a yearly cost?
No, that's our current estimate of what the annual maintenance would be.
Got it. The annual cost of running
Yes.
that program. Got it. Awesome. Thank you. Great presentation and truly humble, brother.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're great.
All right, thank you. So since I'm the last for round one, and I'm gonna take advantage of doing the last and then the beginning of round two, because I have 3 questions or 3.5. Some of them are very easy, yes or no kind of answer, maybe. So here's my first question, right? The easy ones. Not that any of them are hard, but the easy one. On the presentation for FY 2025, your areas of focus, you mentioned 4 items there. Does this budget that's being recommended, it's inclusive of all the funding you will need to focus on those 4 areas and accomplish them?
Oh, yes, yeah,
Yes. So essentially, what you have is what you need.
yes.
Okay. Second question, and I asked that question only because then on the budget comparison, although your budget from the general fund went up about 6%, but it was like $90,000. On your grants, you actually lost about $1 million in the total of grants. So I was thinking the other day, what major functionality you're losing because of $1 million less in grants? Are you losing any functionality? What are you missing? Because $1 million is not easy to compensate.
Yeah. We're not losing any functionality. What these grant projections are is a projected spend rate on grants that we have in place currently. And in some cases, we also forecast future grant awards as well. But only in cases where it's a recurring grant that we have a reasonable expectation that we will continue to receive funding. For example, in the health department, we receive a per capita grant from the state every year, like clockwork. It could end someday, but it likely won't. We receive CDBG funding and ESG funding every year. The amounts may moderate over time, but we feel reasonably confident that we can continue to predict receiving those grants. So what these projections are showing us is what we are planning or anticipating we will spend down over the next couple of fiscal years based on what we have awarded and in hand today, and those grants that we can reasonably expect to continue to get. We make no assumptions about highly competitive grants going forward or anything like that. And so it's not a forecast of, it's not strictly a forecast of new grants, it's really a projected spend rate. And it's one of the things that I really want to revisit in the document, because I think it's hard to understand, and the grants, there's so many of them, they're so different, they're all on different schedules. It gets kind of unwieldy trying to marry the grants projections with a budget document that is really built around a fiscal year and a set appropriation for that fiscal year, with grants that are just so different. And so I'm hopeful that in the next iteration of the budget, we'll have kind of a different format to present the grants information that's a little clearer and gives numbers that are what I would think would be a bit more meaningful.
Perfect, that will be helpful. Now, let me move away a little bit from your presentation. These are still questions that you'll probably be the best to answer. So I had these questions for now like a week or two, and I was just waiting to see how I was going to bring them up just to get a better idea. So if you go to your budget book and you go to 6-11 and 6-12, I'm going to refer to both pages, but on 6-11, licenses and permits, we see that the actual for 2023 of the whole licenses and permits of revenue was $10.3 million. Okay? Then when we look at the adopted budget for 2024, it's just under 6.6. Yet, numbers through February of this fiscal year, I think that we have already collected about $8 million or so, almost $9 million. So we already surpassed what the budget, the adopted budget was, and we still got 4 months to go. We still have March through June that hasn't been accounted for. So that $8 million is most likely going to grow to $10 million or so, similar to 2023. 2 years in a row, we're seeing actuals that are in the $10 million range. Then on 2020, for this recommended budget, the number stayed just under $7 million, 6.9. It increased just a little bit by $400,000. I know as a fiscal person that we tend to budget revenue very conservative, and that is the fiscally responsible thing to do. But now I see a gap of about $3.5 million, right, in being conservative, right? Is this projection, is there an outlier here that I'm not seeing? Is there anything that you could speak to that could show or explain why we're being so conservative in that particular area?
Yes, and the reason I'm kind of digging around in my notebook is because I know in somewhere in here I have the partial answer for that, and that's and I think I mentioned before, I will work with development services to make sure that we have a more detailed answer for you, at least by the time they present next week. The FY23. So first of all, building permits and the related revenue. So I sort of look at the building permits, the electrical, plumbing, and mechanical sort of as a whole. They can fluctuate quite a bit from year to year, but there's a certain range that they kind of fall within. So if I look back over the last, and I'll share this chart with you when we get a response to you, a more detailed response to you, but when I look back over fiscal years from 2014 up until 22, the range was between 4.8 million and the high water mark then was 7.3 million. But it was mostly hovering around high fives, low 6 millions FY23 and FY24 are really extraordinary years because of some very specific projects that I will get some detail from DDS for you. One of them that I do know is the Children's Hospital. It's a major, major project, generated millions of dollars, just that one project. So what we did was we looked at sort of what that historical range is and settled on an amount that seemed like a reasonable base to assume for next year, and then augmented that with the roughly $400,000 that you observed as the increase to account for a handful of other known projects that we expect to come online reasonably soon. So projects in downtown North, a couple of others. Again, I will get more detail on that for you, but we were about as aggressive as we felt we could responsibly be, knowing that this current year and the prior year were really driven by projects that are very unusually large.
Thank you. So my last question before I open the floor for round two will be, so I understand that in order to balance this budget, one of the mitigation strategies that were implemented was to be a little bit more aggressive on the attrition, especially in the police department. And I can see on the North and South District, I can see that the attrition went up. I think combined, it's in the $700-something thousand range between the North and the South District, and it was split equally between the North and the South. So it was a little bit more aggressive in order to, mitigate and balance the budget. Then I see on page 40 of the spreadsheet, I see another line that's called attrition in the mitigation strategies. I assume, and I assume that obviously this attrition line does not include the police because the police have already their own attrition line. I didn't see any other department with any attrition line, not even the fire department. I didn't see any other department, and I could be mistaken, but I didn't see any other department with an attrition line spelled out the same way the police department did. Yet I do see it here, maybe as a cumulative kind of like line of $2.2 million in attrition. Is there any way to break that down and have an idea of where this attrition, because it is a huge increase compared to last year, this attrition line here.
Yes.
We're talking about about $1 million more in attrition. So is there any way to see that breakdown, to see where that attrition comes from?
A couple of things. One, before I get to that, is there is an attrition factor in the fire department, and there's lots of divisions in fire, so it would be easy to miss scanning the tables. So the two departments where we build in an attrition factor directly into the department are police and fire, because they are large enough departments that we could say, again, with some level of confidence, that there's going to be some percentage of vacancy and turnover in those departments. We also know that outside of police and fire, there will also be some percentage of turnover and vacancy, but because we are dealing with smaller departments, we would not make assumptions about a vacancy or turnover rate within any individual department, because if we're wrong, it blows up that department's budget. So we do sort of a community, everybody except public safety, we do this sort of aggregate attrition factor that's meant to represent a vacancy and attrition rate for the rest of the organization. What we did, and Dave did an analysis looking back 6 years, I think 6 years, a 5 or 6 year look back on what our average attrition rate was over that time. And we arrived at a number that, again, we felt was reasonably conservative, that we could use for the balance, the non-public safety attrition here. In the aggregate, we stayed within, I can't remember the exact percentages, but I think it was something on the order of like 10% that we see historically, and I think we used like 8%, just to give us some buffer there.
So it makes sense. Now that you explain it, it makes sense how you could do it as a community, with the exception of fire and police. So which means I assume that, and this is, you could just tell me yes or no on this one, I assume that if this attrition actually does happen the way that it was budgeted, I mean, that's sad to say because we don't want to have so much attrition, but if it does happen, then these departments will not be able to take advantage of that credit because it's not budgeted on their end. Then this attrition, if it surpasses the budgeted amount, then any of these savings then will go to the general fund. Is that correct?
Everything else being equal, yes, it would accrue to the, yeah.
So everything above was budgeted.
Yeah.
So anything above that 2 point something, then that's where it goes, goes to the general fund then. Okay. All right, thank you. Any other questions? All right, Assistant Majority Leader Clark.
Just one more question. Going back to the pay-go model, how sustainable would you say it will continue to be?
At some point, well, let me put it this way. If you look at the kinds of projects that we are able to support with the general fund contribution, you know, we can do, you know, a recurring, you know, major maintenance on roads and bridges and sidewalks and you know, some small and middle-sized projects. I think it would be difficult to take on a very large capital project. And I'm not talking about schools, but you know, a large project would be difficult to undertake just strictly from an operating budget contribution. It would be challenging.
And in comparison, an example of a large project.
You know, when we get
Yeah,
up
I mean,
to,
you can go
know,
from an
yeah, I mean,
example
when
we have in the
when
book.
we get into, you know, we start talking about, you know, a $15 to $20 million project where that money needs to be, you know, available in 1 year and is maybe not suitable for phasing out over multiple years. It would be a challenge. This current budget is, there's another thing, there's another element to this that maybe I'll save it for the night we do the CIP. This budget is allocating $11.4 million to the capital plan. We're proposing that an additional 6 be provided through the current year projected surplus. And then we've also mapped out, you know, how we're going to deploy LoCIP to support it as well. So, I don't know if that answered your question, but it's not, it's a lean program.
Yeah. How long, my final question, how long can we continue on this model of, you're about to have me say LoCIP, pay as you go, before we have to have a real conversation on when we go back out to the capital markets to borrow for a project?
I don't know. Let me think about ways to at least frame the question so that, you know, even if I can't give you an answer, I can at least help sort of frame the issue out a little bit more helpfully. But it doesn't mean we can't start like thinking about, you know, what is our path from here to the point at which we're dipping our toe into the market for borrowing. I don't know. Do you want to add anything? Yeah. And there are restrictions, you know, within the contract for financial assistance. They'll sort of limit our ability to do that as well.
So there are none, no requirements under the statute for MARB to go, for us to go out?
The tier requirements don't speak as directly
That's the
to
contract
it as
assistance?
Tier 2,
Okay.
as the contract for assistance is pretty
cut and dry.
That's where the real.
It's definitely restricted. There's a time frame in which, when we come out from underneath MARB to when we can go out to market, I think is it 5 years?
It's 5 years from the point at which you're no longer Tier 3.
Tier 3, okay. And then you're restricted by dollar amount. So I think it might be, and Julian, when he does respond to your question in writing, will include this. But I can't recall if it's 10 million or 50 million the first time we go out. It's very low numbers.
Yes.
So, you know,
Okay.
if you have a large project in mind that's exceeding those numbers in the future, like something like a new municipal building, that's something that definitely would have to be forecasted out.
Yes, so I've always thought that, I've had this idea for quite some time now, knowing that the pay-go model, understanding why we did it and why we continue to do it, but at some point, we've got to have this real conversation as to when do we change the model to going back to what we did in the past, but not be so careless as to the bonding dollars for borrowing, because that's going to add to our debt. But there are a tremendous amount of things that we can think of that we need repaired. Just alone, the majority of our, I don't want to say the majority, a lot of our roads do not get repaved every year because we can't simply afford to do that. Some of the core infrastructure things. But, I mean, if we want to think about how we can attract more business to the city, how we can grow our grand list, I think that this begs the question, when are we going to have that conversation as to what are the next steps from this current day? I can think of one project I have in my mind that probably will cost about $20 million. It will add to the quality of life of the city, but I just know that the city cannot afford it based upon this type of model. Then we talk about private-public partnership, but that's still going to have to call for some dollars that the city is going to have to give. So if I forget regarding the CIP presentation, let's have the revisit this conversation during that time. So, but thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, so with no other questions, thank you for coming here and this wealth of knowledge. And I know, knowing you, you would not take that compliment for yourself. You will share it with your leadership team. So thank you all for coming here and for contributing to this conversation. And this will conclude our meeting. So our committee meeting is now officially adjourned.
Thank you.
I have no idea what's going on.